Thanks for joining us at Salida United Methodist Church. We are glad to have you from wherever you are in the country or the world, or from your backyard, or from your couch, or from, if you haven't even gotten out of bed yet, that's fine too. So thanks for being with us this morning. We got several announcements for you. First of all, speaking of that kind of thing, got a question from somebody in the congregation. Wanted to know if we needed to change the name of the service. Maybe it should be called Breakfast with Mel or something like that. And I think we can do better. I think we can come up with a more clever name. Pastor in Pajamas, although I didn't wear my pajamas today, but maybe I could, because I know that half of you guys are in yours. So Pastor in Pajamas or something else. But maybe we need to come up with some kind of contest to name what we're going to call this weird time and have a little bit of fun with that. So be thinking about that. We might need a new suggestion on what this is going to be called. A couple other announcements and reminders for you. Church Council is going to meet on Tuesday here at the church. We're going to do that in person, live, with social distancing, of course. And so that'll be at 3 o'clock here at the church. So if you're a part of Church Council, please make arrangements to be here as we discuss possible reopening times and other things that we needed to just kind of get on the agenda to make sure that we are running properly and being good stewards of all that we have. Also want to remind you, small groups, please go ahead and sign up for our small groups. We won't have any this week, but the following week we'll be having some small groups at the church, and the space is limited for those groups, so please RSVP during your preferred time. The dates are the 21st, Tuesday the 21st from 2 to 3, Wednesday the 22nd, 6 to 7 p.m., and then Thursday the 23rd from 11 to 12 p.m. So make sure and sign up to be a part of that. That has been a great time to get together and fellowship a little bit at social distancing, of course. And just please do that so we can kind of keep track of each other. Also want to remind you about the Salida Pregnancy Center's fundraiser to fill up these bottles with change. And so if you've been working on those, know that if you can get those back to us at the church by, let's see, what is the date? Next Sunday the 19th, we can get those over to the Pregnancy Center as one of their major fundraisers for the year. So please continue to collect your change for them so that they can do the work that they do here in our community. What else? Oh, want to say thanks to everyone who went to Hike Church yesterday. We had a good time. Met a new person to Salida, moved here from Austin, Texas not too long ago. Penny, if you're watching, hey. And thanks for being with us yesterday. She came and joined us on the hike, and that was a good time. We got to get out and get a little bit in the higher altitude so we wouldn't be so sweltering hot like it was here in town yesterday. So that was a good time. And we'll have another one of those in 2 weeks. So if you missed our hike church on Saturday, this past Saturday, we will be having another one in 2 weeks. So please save that date. Also, next week, we're going to do something a little bit different and new as well. We're going to be out at Debbie Jackson's house, and we're going to do our social distancing unpicnic, which is you can bring your own picnic for you and your family, bring chairs. We're just going to come out and kind of sit in small clusters, again, socially distanced, being safe, outside, and just want to have a chance to fellowship with each other and talk to one another and share a meal with one another. It won't be a potluck, which my heart grieves for not having any potlucks these days, especially during the summer when we're used to having our river raft guide meals and other things that we do around here. My heart grieves for that, but this is as close as we can get. Debbie will have coolers with water and sodas and things out there, but if you'll bring yourself a picnic and a chair, and we'll be able to spread out and enjoy our time together outside. Hopefully it won't be quite so hot next weekend. We've had our one hot weekend of the month, or the summer. I'm done with that, so that's not going to happen. Next Sunday night at 6:30 out at the Jackson's household. And if you need directions or anything, just call the church, call the office, call Debbie, and however else. And yeah, we'll get you where you need to go. I think that is all of the announcements that I have for you. Let me do a couple adjustments to my screen. And now if you will prepare your hearts and your minds for worship. let me just say, I was listening to Mary and Rod warm up for special music earlier this morning, and you're going to want to be here for that. So just a little bit of a heads up for you on that, to make sure that you stick around for special music here in a few minutes. And we are so blessed to have the talent that we have here with Mary and Rod and others that provide our music. And I just wanted to say something. I know that was not a really super familiar hymn for you guys. And Mary, cheat for me, Mary, if you will. I know the last name is Rickert. What's the first name of who wrote that? Can you see?
Hold open.
Martin.
Martin.
Martin, that's right.
That's the words.
Martin. I had him, I had that particular hymn in there this morning, even though it's not one that we're super familiar with. I had that in there this morning because he wrote that hymn in the midst of a plague, in the midst of a war, and you can see, even in the midst of those things, and even in losing his wife in the midst of that plague, and raising his kids on his own, which, oh my gosh, being a single parent in the middle of this, holy cow. He wrote this song of praise. And so I wanted to make sure and put that out there this morning, that even though that was not a familiar hymn, thank you for listening. And wow, again, what a beautiful job that Mary and Rod do for us. All right, moving on. It's time. Ooh, see that? That was a cool trick. It's time for our virtual offering time. We want to say thank you again for the way that you all continue to bless us and continue to send in your pledges and your offerings and your tithes that allow us to do great things, including working on getting our new AV system in. And at some point later in the service, maybe after it's all through, I can turn the camera around and let you guys look at our new platform, our new kind of bird's eye perch for Bob that we're working on. It's coming together, and we're really hoping it's going to be all put together by Wednesday as far as all of our new AV equipment. So again, thank you for all of your support in that, and support to keep the lights on and keep us doing what we're doing here and maintain this beautiful building that we have. So thank you. And now if you'll join me as we give thanks back for these gifts. God, we are so thankful for the many ways that you bless us, the many ways that you allow us to bless others. May we continue as a church family to not only support the ministry that happens to our people, whether they be in New Mexico or on the East Coast or California. We've got people on both coasts watching these things. All of these places, God, may we continue to minister to them, but may we also reach out to our community that is in such need right now. We thank you for these gifts. We thank you for the way that you take care of us, the way that you are faithful to us, even in these times. Amen. At the point in our service where we are wanting to talk about our joys and concerns. And I did see in the comments over here, I saw a prayer request from Jerry Swann already. And let's see if I can get to that so I can put it up on the screen. I think that's right there. Yeah, Jerry is having some elbow surgery, and so we want to lift that up. I'm glad to hear that your aunt is coming to stay with you during that to make sure that you're taken care of. And also want to say thanks to everyone who has reached out to her already through messages. Know that you're going to continue to do that as you take care of one another so well. Let me see. If you put something in the comments that you would like me to pray about, please. Please put that in the comments so I can see that. And I just saw one from my buddy Stephanie So, who also put Revelli with Melly, Revel with Mel, another word for early morning. Oh my gosh, Stephanie, you're crazy. Stephanie is about to deliver her second child anytime now. Wednesday, awesome. Okay, so please be in prayers for Stephanie So Slim. Again, the greatest name ever. So glad that you married a man with the last name Slim. That is such a great name. What else do we have? Any other? Let's see. Anything else? Any other prayer requests coming through? If not, I've got a couple here already that we know of. I want you to remember to continue to keep Dick and Lori Eisenberg in your prayers as they are dealing with some medical situations with Lori and just kind of figuring out what next steps are for her. Please keep those in your prayers. Also for Daniela and Leo, her son Leo, she appreciates your continued prayers as they are doing better, that they are definitely getting better. And Daniela is not bouncing back quite as quickly as it goes. Children bounce back much quickly, we know that. But keep praying for them as they are recovering from some illnesses. Also, I mentioned last week about Barb Williams. Most of you guys know her and Larry, who used to live here, have moved to Colorado Springs, but Barb has gotten a diagnosis that she would like us to pray for. And she says nothing to get too excited about, but at the same time, it's a serious medical issue, and so please keep Barb and Larry in your prayers. And also for, the friends and family of Sarah Cooper Dreyer, who passed away at her daughter's home in Boulder a couple weeks ago. Continue to lift up that family. As far as joys go, let's not forget about joys. A couple things. We got Hike Church off the ground yesterday. That was a good time. Continue to lift that up, and please join us for our next one. Also wanted to let you know that we did get a grant from our conference for some of this AV work, and so that's definitely a celebration. And I told you a little bit of the update, and we'll turn around the camera at some point and let you look at that in case you're interested. Or if you would like to stop by the church, Lisha and I are lonely. We really are. We get lonely up here in the office. We're used to people coming by all the time. And so if you wanted to drop by the office sometime with your mask, with social distancing, I have my 6-foot stick. If I need to use it, I can use it to keep everybody away from everybody. So we haven't electrified that thing yet. I just want to let you know, so it's completely safe. But we do have our 6-foot stick. So please come by the office. We would love to see your faces. Come by and you can see the work that's being done, and you would just get a chance to sit and talk to us, which we love because we get lonely up here in the office. So, and is that a say? Yes, we are. Is that from Lisha? It probably is that. Yes, we are lonely here at the office all the time. So please come by and see what's going on and say hello and all of those kind of things. All right, I'm not seeing any other prayer requests that are popping up on the screen. Hopefully I haven't missed any, but let's take a little bit of time in silent prayer this morning. God, we do come to you with our grief and our concerns and all of these things. God, you know the situation that we're in. You know intimately not only the world situation, but the situation of each of our hearts. You know the cries and the pain and the despair that each of us feels. And you also are aware of the joy and those moments of gladness that we experience each and every day, whatever may cause that. And God, we are so thankful for your presence with us. May you be with these people we've mentioned, for Jerry and for Barb and for Dick and Lori and others who are struggling, God, with different kinds of surgeries and diagnosis and all other sorts of medical issues. God, we ask that you would be with them. We ask that you would be with our society as we are just coping with all sorts of things that we maybe weren't expecting. And God, may you give us the presence of mind and the humility to see our place in the midst of all of that, that we might be able to create something new and fresh, even out of these very difficult times. And God, we also want to remember all of the joys. God's so excited about Stephanie and being able to have this child, and for other friends, Chris and Heather, who have recently welcomed a baby into their home as well. God, we're so thankful for the new life, the new birth that is happening all around us in the midst of all of the tragedy. And God, you do continue to bless us. You do continue to give us new avenues for ministry and new ways of living that are so much better than the old way. And so may we be thankful. May we remember. And as we walk this rocky and unpredictable road together, may we pray the prayer that you taught your disciples to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. All right. Thank you for that. And I just have to say, buckle up, because Mary's like, no, Mel, don't build it up like that. No, seriously, it's that good. So hang on. I'm going to turn the camera, and we'll have some special music.
Take my will.
tell you. Yep. Thank you, Mary and Rod, for that. Let me do a couple little things here to my PowerPoint, and then we will get moving on. Message today. Let's see, where are we? There we are. Let's see if I can get that in there. Okay. All right. So we are continuing on with our sermon series, Virus as a Summons to Faith. And let me remind you, these are not my words. It's not even all of my research. It's a whole lot of Walter Brueggemann, who is one of my favorite theologians, Old Testament historian and theologians. And so I took his book and then added a few of my thoughts and let him do all the research and all the work. And then I kind of added my thoughts and put it into a context for us today. And so if you remember what we have been saying, what we talked about a couple weeks ago, and let me also say, it has been a couple weeks since I've been preaching, and so it's going to be hard for me to sit still. You guys know I like to walk and talk, and it's going to be hard for me to sit still on this one. This is a really fun one, especially since I didn't preach last week. I'm kind of wound up and ready to go. So if you see me moving around a lot, you know it's because what I really want to do is get up and walk and use my hands and all those kind of things. Kind of excited about this. But if you remember, what we talked about a couple weeks ago is that plague and pestilence is a common theme in the scriptures. It's something that we see throughout the scriptures, especially in the Old Testament, as a theme of what's happening in the story of God and the story of God's people. And last 2 weeks ago, we talked about an instance of that, where we talked about David, who, after having angered God in some choices that he made, some things that were super selfish on his part, and showed how he was relying on himself and not on God, God said, hey, you've got a choice here. You can either experience a natural disaster that's going to be very harmful to your people, or you're going to experience an enemy attacking you, or you can receive a plague and from God, and he chooses the plague. He chooses the plague, and he chose it because he would rather deal with God's mercy. He identified the fact that God is merciful, and so we saw in that in the midst of plagues, in the midst of these kind of things that really are difficult, that God is merciful, God is in the presence of those things, and we saw that a couple weeks ago. And we're going to shift focus this morning a little bit to the book of Jeremiah, and we're going to see how Jeremiah uses the idea of plague, and this is true in the Old Testament. A lot of times, even when people were being attacked by their enemies, they might refer to that as no, it wasn't really. And oftentimes there would be, because of sanitation issues and things like that, there would be plagues that would go along anytime there was kind of a war or a famine or anything like that. And so kind of two things going on here in Jeremiah as we're looking at this. And we're going to be skipping around a little bit in the book, but I'm going to tell you why we're going to do that. Let me kind of give you an introduction to the book here at the beginning. The book of Jeremiah covers three phases of the nation of Judah, Judah being the southern kingdom. Jeremiah was in the southern kingdom rather than the northern kingdom. And the book of Jeremiah covers three phases in the nation of Judah's history. The first one is the Jerusalem before it fell to Babylon. Jerusalem in the days before it fell, when it was still a nation, the nation of Israel to the north had already fallen to Assyria, but Jerusalem and Judah were hanging in there. They had not been conquered yet. And so he's speaking at parts of the book, he's speaking to the people before the fall, and he's warning them and saying, hey, you need to get it together, because if you don't get together, there's this superpower out there that is going to harm us. And so he tried to warn them. He tried to give them some heads up about what they needed to do in part of the book. And then in other parts of the book, that has already happened. What he said was going to happen. And so he's actually reporting now in parts of Jeremiah. He's reporting the fall of Jerusalem as Babylonia has come in. And if you remember, they come in a couple times. They come in, it's like a soft opening, I guess, of the taking over of Jerusalem and Judah. And they come in a couple times and they do some things. And then they come in again and again and again to the point where Jerusalem was really no longer even standing after the third wave of that. And so he's reporting during the fall of Jerusalem. And then after that, after the Babylonians have come into Jerusalem, into Judah, have taken people captive, he is still in Jerusalem, and he is trying to encourage the people. He's trying to preach and send out letters of encouragement during the Babylonian exile and for those people who were left in Judah. And so there's 3 phases going on. And if the book was written chronologically, it would be really easy to figure out what is what. It'd be able to figure out, okay, is he prophesying here? Is he reporting here? What's going on? But the book of Jeremiah is not recorded or organized chronologically in that way. It's not written like a story that says, well, first this, and then that. It's actually grouped together by theme. And so it's sometimes a little bit difficult to figure out, okay, is he prophesying? Is he reporting? What is he doing? And, you know, it may not necessarily matter to us. It may have mattered to them, but it doesn't necessarily matter to us. We can still pull out messages here, whether he was prophesying, whether he was reporting live as it happened, or as you would, or howbeit. He gives us these messages and these themes in Jeremiah about what was happening to the people. And so one of the main themes in Jeremiah is that he laments the coming or the current social state of the nation of Judah. That's what you see, this message over and over and over again, whether it be prophecy about what's going to happen or what is actually happening. He talks and he laments quite a bit. Jeremiah is known as the weeping prophet because he put so much emphasis into what he was saying. There was so much emotion behind what he was saying. And so he's known as the weeping prophet as he laments what is either going to happen or what is happening to the country and the people that he loves. And so in this book, he describes a social environment that would have seemed unimaginable. As he starts to describe the situation in Judah and primarily in Jerusalem, as he's describing it, whether it be a prophecy or a reporting, it would have been something that the people would have been, oh, that is horrible. That is no society we want to live in. It would have seemed like to them like some of the dystopian novels that we read or that we have read over the past decade or so, a genre that has become very popular recently. And it seems so unimaginable as we read these things, and then we start to see how they could become a reality. And so as we read, as I said, we're going to be kind of skipping around to a few passages in Jeremiah with some commonalities. These things, especially if they were prophecy, might have seemed totally unimaginable to the people when he delivered them. But then they saw them come to fruition. And as we read some of these, again, it seems like a harsh world, but we might recognize some of these descriptions. They may sound a little bit familiar for us now, even though they might have seemed not at all possible or even something unimaginable not too long ago. So we're going to start, I believe, in chapter 7 of Jeremiah is the first spot. And I will let you know that these 3 passages that I'm going to be reading, the reason why I'm jumping around, they have a common theme, a common kind of thought in them, and even some very common language. And so listen as I read first from Jeremiah chapter 7. And I will silence in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride, for the land shall become a waste. All right, not a pretty picture, right? Let's skip to another part in, I believe this is in Jeremiah 16, starting in verse 4. They shall die of deadly diseases. They shall not be lamented, nor shall they be buried. No one shall break bread for the mourner to comfort him for the dead, nor shall anyone give him a cup of consolation to drink for his father, his mother. You shall not go into the house of feasting and sit with them to eat and drink. For thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I will silence in this place before your eyes and in your days. Here's that term, this one that's being repeated, the voice of mirth, the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom, and the voice of the bride. And now one more spot in Jeremiah where he uses this same term in chapter 25. I will devote them to destruction and make them a horror, a hissing, and an everlasting desolation. Sounds nice. Moreover, I will banish from them the voice of mirth, the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride, the grinding of the millstones and the light of the lamp. This whole land shall become a ruin and a waste. It's not a real pretty picture, is it? But what is he describing here? Well, he's either prophesying, reporting a society where a few things are just not happening. Very important things to society are not happening. And again, we might recognize this a little bit. The first thing he says that's not happening when he says the voice of the bridegroom and the bride are going to be silenced. One thing that was not happening in Judah and Jerusalem is they weren't having weddings, and even more so, wedding celebrations. That's the big thing in this. They may still have been having quiet ceremonies or, people getting together in one way or another, but they weren't having celebrations. They weren't celebrating the way they used to. They weren't celebrating these wonderful events that were happening in the lives of these couples. They weren't getting together. There was not this celebration because of the new lives that people were forming together. Weddings and wedding celebrations in particular were not happening. Another thing that wasn't happening was funerals. Now, of course, people were still dying, and in fact, it says that they were dying quite a bit, that the land was being plagued by death, but yet funerals, and moreover, more specifically, the celebrations of life that go on around funerals. You know how that is when we gather for funerals, that yes, it's a very sad time, and we get together and we celebrate the life of people, and we lament the loss and the grief that we feel, but there's something about getting together that becomes a little bit of a celebration that wasn't happening. That wasn't happening. God was saying you don't go in, or Jeremiah, speaking for God, was saying, don't go into people's houses and sit down and have a meal with them and reminisce with them when people die. Don't get together. That wasn't happening. You can't get together and lament. You can't sit down and have a meal with people to remember and to grieve. Funerals and celebrations of life and lamenting together wasn't happening. Another thing that wasn't happening when it says that the millstone would stop grinding and the light of life would stop, work was not happening. There was no work to be done. There was no economy. Nothing was happening. Half the people had been taken away. That included merchants. That included people who made things run. The economy was completely shutting down, which again kind of takes something away. Work is so important to us as humans, isn't it? I know, and Lisha has said this in the office, that for a while there, she was coming to the office and there just wasn't a whole lot to do. There weren't bulletins to be made. There weren't groups to manage. There wasn't all of these things to do, but she was coming into work because it seemed normal. It felt normal. It was the only part of her life and day that was normal. Work is so important to us, and it wasn't happening in these days in Judah and Jerusalem. And so, the thing is about these weddings and these funerals too that we have to remember is that these weren't just social, but they were also religious gatherings. When people would get together in these days for weddings and funerals, it wasn't just about celebrating a new couple or a new life together, and it wasn't about just lamenting and celebrating the life of someone who had passed. It was also a way for them to express their faith. They would walk through the entire story of God in the midst of these celebrations. And so it wasn't just a social thing, it was a religious thing that wasn't happening. Also, the temple in Jerusalem, the center of their worship, had been destroyed. And so not only was it their social and their work lives that were completely being disrupted, it was their religious lives as well. These were very religious happenings, and the economy was in trouble. And we know, don't we? We know how people get when our pocketbooks start to get affected. Don't we know how that makes us a little bit crazy? And don't we know what a bleak existence it is when we can't get together socially, when we can't get ourselves to work the way we used to, and some of the socialness that happens within that? When we can't religiously gather together? Aren't we feeling that? I'm telling you, it's so hard to preach to an empty sanctuary. It's so difficult, and it's not just the fact that I have to sit still in front of the camera and can't walk around, but it's also not being able to see the reactions on your faces. It's a bleak existence when we can't gather together for these things. And they were feeling it in Judah and Jerusalem. And Jeremiah puts it so poignantly when he sums it all up in these 3 passages. And he says, the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness were silenced. They were silenced. Mirth, that idea of joyfulness and laughter. The voice of mirth and the voice of gladness were silenced through the land. But there's one other place in Jeremiah. We see this phrase come up in these 3 passages that we looked at, but there's one other spot where he uses this phrase. And so we need to get to that one as well. This is in Jeremiah chapter 33. It starts in verse 10. It says, it is a waste without man or beast, but in the cities of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem that are desolate, without man or inhabitant or beast, there shall be heard again the voice of mirth, the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom, and the voice of the bride, the voices of those, and this is new to this little phrase, the voices of those who sing as they bring thank offerings to the house of the Lord. Give thanks to the Lord of hosts, for the Lord is good, for his steadfast love endures forever. This is not forever. Jeremiah wanted to give that message that yes, even though your streets are empty and you're feeling a little bit worthless right now, and there's no mirth and there's no gladness, and it's just desolate out there, and you're wondering, is this ever going to change? Jeremiah says, there will be again in your streets the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness and the voice of thanks being offered up to God. This is not forever. There will be those voices again. There will be something to celebrate again. There will be joy in the land once again. But here's what he's not saying. Here's what he's not saying, and this is a very subtle kind of thing. It's not a promise. He's not promising, hey, soon everything's going to just get back to normal. It's not what he's saying. And there's a little bit of a subtleness in that passage about it, in those verses in chapter 33. He's kind of hinting at it here, that they're not going to just go back to normal. But it really is spelled out if we go back a few more verses in chapter 33 to really set up this idea of the voices of mirth and the voices of gladness returning to the land. You see how I'm having a hard time sitting still here? I just want to get up and walk around. Sometimes I need a seatbelt when I'm preaching. But yeah, there's a hint. And so we need to go back a little bit. We need to read a few passages if we're really going to know what he's saying they're going to return to. We need to go back. So let me read starting in verse 6 of chapter 33. Behold, I will bring to it, and what he's talking about with it is Judah and Israel, not only the nation of Judah, but also to Israel. I'm going to bring health and healing. I will heal them and reveal to them abundance of prosperity and security. I will restore the fortunes of Judah and the fortunes of Israel and rebuild them as they were at first. I will cleanse them from all the guilt of their sin against me, and I will forgive all of the guilt of their rebellion against me. And this city, which Jerusalem, shall be to me a name of joy, a praise and a glory before all the nations of the earth, who shall hear all of the good that I do for them. Okay, so what he's saying here, the promise is health and healing for the people and the land. And doesn't that sound good? Doesn't that sound great? And you got to know the people were excited about that, health and healing, where all they had seen was depression and brokenness and death. And so he's saying, hey, once again, you're going to experience health and healing. And he uses a phrase that he uses several times during the passage. He says, I'm going to restore the fortunes of Israel and Judah. And you say, yes, I love that. Fortune is awesome. Give me some fortune. Can I have a restored fortune? That would be fantastic. I may not have had a fortune before, but I would love to have one now. That would be great. And if that's what he was talking about, that would be great. But he's not talking about wealth. When he says restore the fortunes, he's not saying, oh, and by the way, you're going to get rich through all of this, and everything's going to be great, and you're going to have more money than you've ever dreamed of, or more money than you've ever had before. When he says restore the fortunes of Israel and Judah, that's not what he's talking about. He's not talking about money. He's also not talking about nostalgia. He's not saying, oh, we're going to go back to the way it was in the good old days. Y'all know the good old days? Y'all remember? And maybe you hear this a lot, maybe from the older generation. Oh, if we could only go back to the good old days. You do realize what back in the good old days when they were happening, people were still saying, oh, I wish we could go back to the good old days. There's this nostalgia thing that we always kind of make the past look better than it really was, and we long to get back to it. But in the time, it wasn't so good. This isn't about nostalgia. He's not saying we're going to go back to what we had, because really what we had was not that great, especially not as great as we might remember it right now. He's not talking about going back to nostalgia, and he's not talking about going back to business as usual. He's not talking about going back to the way things had been done in the past. Not at all. Rather, he says, we're going to go back to things as they were at first. What is he talking about here? What is he talking about when he says we're going to return to the ways that they were at first? Well, think about that. When the nation of Israel, before it split, before it got greed in it, before it got power into it, the way it was restored at first was a glorious thing. It was to be a light to the nations. It was a way for the rest of the world to see the people of God and to see a God in a positive way. It was a society that was set up on the idea of loving God and loving others, of taking care of the poor, of taking care of the oppressed, of leveling the field for everyone. It was a way of bringing joy to the world. Jeremiah says we're not going to go back to the way it was when the poor were being oppressed and the foreigner was being taken advantage of, or where power and money were the most important things. No, we're going to go back to the way it was at first. The way it was at first, restoring the priorities and the principles that actually bring abundant life. Not just abundant life for the people at the top, but abundant life for all. We want to go back to that. We don't want to go back to this mess of a society that got us into trouble in the first place. And the thing about that, resetting priorities, resetting principles, that's not a quick fix, is it? That doesn't just happen overnight, returning to that. No, it's hard. And what you have to do, and that's what Jeremiah was saying to the people, and guess what? They had time to do this. The people were going to have to slow down long enough to evaluate their principles and their priorities. And really think about and meditate on where they've been and where they got off track. How did we get into this situation? Jeremiah said, your fortunes are going to be restored. And you're going to go back to the way you were at first after you take the time to reevaluate and decide what's really important in this world, and then decide to make that change for the better. And guess what had happened? Jeremiah was exactly right. It took 70 years, but they did restore back again to the priorities that had made them a great nation once before, where they were focused more on the priorities of a God who is for the oppressed, and the priorities of a God who loves everyone, as well as this great creation. Only took them 70 years. Maybe that's not so encouraging to you this morning, but let's get a little more specific. What does this all have to do with me? What is this message in Jeremiah about fortunes being restored and returning to as we were? What does this have to do with me? Well, first of all, how many wedding celebrations of life, baby showers, birthday parties, graduations, open houses, How many of those have been put off in the past few months? I know, having had a birthday myself and having my son have a birthday, I had to scramble, really difficult to try to make his birthday special. And even with all of the things that I did, I'm sure I'm going to hear about it in therapy in the next several years with him about how, wow, that birthday was not great. How many of these things have we had to put off? How many celebrations of life? How many wedding receptions? How many graduation celebrations have we had to put off in these past months? Oh yeah, and our economy. It's in trouble, with more to come, I'm afraid. Have we made some adjustments, and some really good adjustments? Yeah, we have, but our economy is in trouble. What about the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness? Now, I think that we still have this. Yeah, we do. But it's hard to come by, isn't it? We have to really work at it. We have to find small things to celebrate. We have to discover joy in really odd places. And I feel like, especially as a whole, the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness is just fading from our society. And at some point we're going to run out of Netflix shows too. Oh my goodness, what's going to happen then? I was talking about that the other day. We're going to run out eventually. Kidding about that a little bit. Not that we won't run out, but that really affects us all that much. What about the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness? See, we're starting to understand here that we've only just begun in this. That this resurgence that we're seeing is, they tell us, is not the second wave. This is just part of the first wave. Talking this morning before service about the fact that probably there won't be singing, not only in our houses of worship together, but also just concerts and band and choir and things for our school that may not happen for 18 months to 2 years. The voice of mirth and the voice of gladness is hard to find in our society these days. But here's the thing to remember. Jeremiah stressed God's faithfulness to God's people. And again, I remember that hymn we sang at the very beginning that was written in such horrible circumstances, but yet he was able to write something to bring forward the idea that God is faithful in our lives, even in the middle of very difficult situations, even in the moments when the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness are being silenced. Jeremiah really wanted to say and stress God's faithfulness to his people, and that this is not forever. But here's a question too. Are we looking to go back to just business as usual when we say we want this all to be over? Are we completely satisfied with saying, can't we just get back to normal? Can't we just get back to the society that we've known? Is that what we really want? Hey, guess what? Our society is a mess. The way we treat people and the way we treat the earth and the way we deal with people, oh my gosh, it's a mess. Our government is a mess. It's just crazy out there. Is that really what we want to go back to? Or is this an opportunity to get back to the principles and the priorities that line up with the principles and the priorities of our faith? Is this our opportunity to not just go back to normal, but to go back to something that is even better, to go back to something that is as we were before, to be set up as something that is so much better than what we've had? Is that where we are? Is that what we can do in this time? I think it's no coincidence that social issues are rising to the top of our awareness right now. And I don't have to mention what those things are. I've mentioned them over the past several weeks about the things that are coming up. But it's not just in the good old USA either. It is worldwide, folks. This time of slowing down has given people really a chance to look at their lives and their world and the societies that they live in and say, whoa, this is messed up. It's happening all over the world where people are rising up and saying, wow, our healthcare systems are a mess. Wow, the way we govern each other is a mess. Wow, the way we have this caste system is just not acceptable. The way that we look down on certain groups of people and put all the blame for everything on them is not working. The way that we spend our money is wrong. The way we tax our people is just a catastrophe. The way we hold people down and make sure that they have no way to rise up is just not working anymore. And you see uprisings happening all over the world, not just where we are in the United States, where people are saying enough of this, and they're reevaluating priorities, and they're reevaluating principles, and they're longing for something better than what we had before all of this started. It's worldwide. It's not just here. And I'm reminded of the passage that we read yesterday at Hike Church, Psalm 8. We did a little Lectio Divina on Psalm 8, and all of this popped up all at one time. There's no mystery in that. But what it says in Psalms 8, it's talking about how humanity has been given dominion over the world, that at creation, humanity was put in charge and says, okay, this is yours. And we have so made a mess of it, whether that be society or just our earth, the way we've mistreated our world and our just all of the things in creation that we have. Oppression of creature and creation. We have royally screwed it up. And this is the time for us to say, whoa, wait, can't we do better? Don't we want to go back to something that's even better than what we had before? What would it look like for us to be restored to what we were at first? What does that look like? Can we imagine that? Can we dream about that? Can we stand for that? Can we say we want that? Can we get in the streets and say things have got to change? What if this is time for us to humble ourselves and repent of the ways that we have screwed it up so badly through our greed and our power mongering and our mistreating of people and our environment and all of these things that we've been given? What would it look like if we humbled ourselves and said, we want something different? We want something better. We want to return to those priorities and principles that our faith was originally set up on. Not so that we can be legalists, not so that we can hold everybody to some kind of legal code, but so that we can honor each other as humans and honor this great creation that has been given to us. And as we do that, we honor God. As we do those things, we honor God. That's what brings us back to the way we were at first. Something to think about. What would it look like? What steps do we need to take to say we are not going to be satisfied with going back to normal? We want our fortunes restored. We want more for this world, for everyone, not just us. And in the midst of all of that, as we do that, however long it takes, I want to leave you with the idea that God will be faithful. He will be faithful as we humble ourselves and repent of our self-centeredness. He will be faithful to us. And we can see something so much better than what we had before. Let's pray together. God, we are creatures that like what we like. We want it when we want it, how we want it. But oh God, may we reevaluate. May we humble ourselves. May we repent of the ways that we have harmed others and harmed our world, and may we get out and do something about it. May we change for the better in the midst of all of these other things. And may we have a better world when we come out on the other side. But in the midst of the end time, May we remember that you are faithful. And may we find moments and glimpses of the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness as we strive for better things. Give us your strength, give us your confidence. Help us to rely on you. In the name of Christ, we pray. Amen. So, as promised, let me stick my head in the screen really awkwardly here. Let me just swing the camera. You may not be able to see, but you see that big thing back in the back corner back there? Let me move the microphone here a little bit. Oh, yeah, that's going to be our new AV booth back there. And if you've forgotten what this place looks like, let me just kind of pan around a little bit. Some of your faces on the pews. Oh, yeah, Mary's going to go stand up there so you can see that it's safe and all back there. Let's see, I have a hard time knowing where I'm at. There we go. So yeah, that's what's happening in here these days, and wow, did we miss having you in here. We will be evaluating at the church council meeting on Tuesday what we can do about bringing back live worship in the sanctuary, but again, we will do no harm. We want to make sure that you are safe. We want to make sure that you are healthy, and so we are not rushing things. We just want to be wise with what we're doing. And so know that that is at the utmost of our discussions as we talk about bringing you back into the sanctuary. And we want to have not only a healthy but a positive worship experience, because as you know, the things that we are so used to doing when we are at worship, we won't be able to do all of those things. And so we are trying to create the best thing for you and for us as a church. So hang in there with us. But again, no matter what we do as far as in-person worship in the building, we will continue to live stream, and hopefully live stream better as we are building our new AV systems around here. And so that will still be happening as well. In the meantime, before things change, may you be aware of God's faithfulness, and may you be able to rise up every day and say, I want a better world. I don't want to go back to just normal. I want something better for me, for those like me, for those not like me, for my children and for their children. May we stress, number one, that God is faithful, and may we also realign our priorities and our principles so that we can go back to a better world. Go and be creators of this new culture with God as your guide.